Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now, your host, Tim Johnson.
Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show television version. I'm your host, Tim Johnson. For almost 2 years now, on Talk 107.3 FM in Baton Rouge, we've brought you conversations with high-profile business leaders focused on the Louisiana businesses that shape our growing economy and highlighted economic development, education, workforce development, policy issues, technology, and innovation. We're excited to bring that same focus to our new weekly television show with our partners at Cox 4, and we're glad you've chosen to join us. Louisiana's economy is entering a growth phase like we may have never seen. Our state has been transformed, and we now boast one of the very best business climates in the United States. Our State Department, Louisiana Economic Development, has led that transformation, and the man at the center of LED is Secretary Stephen Moray. When we come back, we'll talk to Stephen about the transformation and what's on the horizon. Thanks for joining us today on the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. When we started our radio show a couple of years ago, I reached out to my friend Stephen Moray, Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development, and asked him to be my first guest. And he agreed, and we've been doing that show now for a couple of years. And so we got ready to do the first television show. I reached out to Stephen again, and he was happy to come on board. So Stephen Moray, welcome to the first edition of the Louisiana Business and
Tim,
Industry Show.
It's great to be here. And you know, the first thing I wanted to tell you was congratulations on the great success of the radio show. I remember when you first told me the vision for it, you were getting started, and you've ended up having just an incredible group of guests on the show, and I'm honored to be the first guest on the TV show. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. You know, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, and what I've found out is to put together a good show, whether it's television or radio, you have interesting guests who have interesting things to say, you ask them decent questions, and you stay out of their way. And so that's the philosophy. But we got a lot to talk about, so let's jump into it. I think most of our viewers are probably aware, but let's talk about the current mission and structure of Louisiana economic development?
Sure. Well, Louisiana Department of Economic Development is responsible for leading economic development efforts for the state of Louisiana, as you might imagine. But ultimately, we're focused on one goal, and that is encouraging job growth at a pace faster than the South and the U.S. overall. My personal long-term target for Louisiana during a healthy U.S. economy would be about 40,000 net new jobs per year. If we can hit that number on a consistent basis over the next 10 to 20 years on average, we will be in a position to be one of the fastest growing states in the South, one of the fastest growing states in the country on a regular basis, and that's going to have tremendous secondary benefits. Good population growth, good tax revenue growth to invest in higher education and roads and schools and other things that are important to people in Louisiana. It'll mean population in-migration every year, more people moving into Louisiana than moving out of Louisiana.
Something we've seen for the last couple of years for the first time in a long time.
It's been a very difficult time for the national economy, but we've been able to do much better than the U.S. overall. You know, I checked the numbers a few days ago. If you go back to when Governor Jindal took office to today, we literally have the 6th best job growth in America, 6th best nationally, 2nd best in the South, behind only our little neighbor there to the west. And we've had 5 years in a row of population and migration. So we've done very well during a difficult period for the national economy. But obviously, job growth has not been what we'd like to see nationally. What I'm excited about today is that we're now transitioning to a completely different phase where we're not just going to be doing better than the vast majority of the country, we're going to be doing really, really well in an absolute sense. It's going to be a lot of fun to be doing business in Louisiana the next few years.
Well, it has been fun over the last couple of years, and I know the best is yet to come, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later in the show. But when Governor Jindal asked you to become Secretary of the Department of Economic Development back in 2008, and you agreed, I know one of the things you said to the governor at that time, and he agreed with, was that we had to do significant work to change the business climate in our state, to change the perception of Louisiana as a place to do business and to live and to work. And you guys have done that in a significant way. Ethics reform, education reform, workforce development. So you couple those things with a lot of the natural things that occur here, and we've seen great improvement in our overall rankings and business climates. Talk about that, and then talk about the story you told me off air a little earlier about some of the things you get to hear now that we may have never heard before.
Well, Tim, I was deeply honored when then Governor-elect Jindal, in I think November of 2007 or early December of 2007, asked me to be secretary. And I told him, Governor, I'm so honored to be asked, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page about something. I said, you know, if you really just want someone to be a salesman for Louisiana, I think I can do that, but I think there are people that can do that better than me, that have more experience doing that. But if you want someone who's going to both market the state and recruit companies, but also work on improving the economic competitiveness of Louisiana, the business climate of Louisiana, then I think maybe I'm your guy. And he was absolutely committed to that. I think he realized very early on that it wasn't just a matter of selling Louisiana better. We needed to work on our product. We needed to make Louisiana a more attractive place in which to invest. We couldn't be the only state in the country that had a sales tax on investment. We couldn't be a state that had some of the worst governmental ethics laws in the country. With all the poverty in our state and the education issues, we couldn't afford to not have a high quality workforce development program. So those were really things that we focused on very early. In fact, we even created a dedicated team in my department focused on competitiveness issues. And when you look at those national rankings, you know, we typically used to rank at the bottom, let's say, roughly, or at least the bottom 5. We've moved up more than any state in America overall. And really across the board, we now stand at a higher point in every national business climate ranking, every single one, than we ever were prior to 2008. Just yesterday, Site Selection announced that we came out number 6 best in the country. I can promise you, before 5 years ago, we were never in the top 10 on any of those rankings. Now we're in the top 10 on 3 of them, and we've moved up 20 plus spots on most of them. Site Selection, for example, just 4 years ago, we were number 25. Now we're number 6, up 19 spots. There are many other examples. The story I was relating to you off air before we started, I spent a lot of time traveling around the country meeting with site selection consultants. These are people that work with businesses to help them decide where they're going to locate major investments. They're very, very important people. We want them to think good things about Louisiana. one of the top folks in that business, I won't mention his name, he may not want to be repeated. I bumped into him, and the first thing he said, Steve, I got to tell you, 10 years ago, Louisiana was a joke. He said, my clients would not consider Louisiana. And he said, today, well, you guys just announced a project with our firm. It was actually a relocation with corporate headquarters that left the New Orleans area after Katrina, has now come back. Now, not everyone feels quite that strong about the before and the after, but I will tell you, I think the most gratifying thing to me recently has been when I've had those visits this year in 2013, 5 years now after we started, almost every visit starts with something equivalent to, wow, what has happened in Louisiana? It's just amazing the trajectory that you guys are on today. Now, that's not to say we're where we want to be. We've made a tremendous amount of progress, but I think that our best days are ahead of us, and I think the trajectory that we're on is one that we want to continue in the future.
We're going to talk a lot more about that trajectory and a lot of the success that we've had. We're visiting with Secretary Stephen Morey of Louisiana Economic Development. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. We're visiting with Stephen Morey, the Secretary of Louisiana Economic Development. Stephen, in the first segment, we talked about sort of the transformation of Louisiana in terms of its business climate, its reputation, and the perception of the business community. Now, they're finding out what I think we've known for a long, long time, right? That this truly is a special place with so many natural advantages. You think about the Mississippi River, what I call the greatest economic transportation artery in the world, and we sit at the mouth of it. All of these natural resources, 30% of the nation's energy supply coming through our coast, the city of New Orleans, our culture, our people, our work ethic, really truly is a special place. And now that we're getting our politics in line and we're getting our governmental leadership in line, good things are starting to happen. But a lot of those natural things that exist here have been here for a long, long time. And I know you guys are working hard to really try to leverage and take advantage of them in a very positive way. Talk about the effort to leverage those naturally occurring things in our great state.
Well, we are, in fact, very, very blessed with the Mississippi River, 6 deep water ports, one of the biggest port systems in the world, 6 Class 1 railroads, one of only, I think, 2 states in the country with that kind of dense railroad system. We have the most extensive natural gas pipeline network in America, incredibly fertile agricultural lands and so forth, a great state for timber. We have tremendous natural resources. We have tremendous geographic location advantages. And those are things that we're definitely trying to leverage to a very large extent. But I would tell you that when you look around the world, some of the places that have faced some of the same challenges as Louisiana with our politics and our lack of kind of focus on economic development over the decades have actually been because of that natural resource wealth. When you have such fertile land, when you have the river, when you have New Orleans, when you have the mineral wealth that we have in Louisiana, other places around the world have found what we found, which is that it's kind of easy to get a little complacent. And that's what happened. You know, states like North Carolina, for example, that don't have those resources, realized 30, 40 years ago that they needed to diversify their economies as you know, tobacco was dying and furniture business was going away and other things that had sort of sustained them were not going to drive their growth in the future. So as much as we want to leverage those resources that we have, and we are certainly going to see tremendous economic growth as a result of this industrial boom that we're experiencing and that we've been cultivating. At the same time, we have to realize that some of the things that we most want to attract to Louisiana really don't see those things particularly as assets. If you're opening, for example, a software development center, you know, the Mississippi River doesn't really matter to you.
Not that much.
You know,
right?
the Class 1 railroads don't really matter. The ports don't really matter. So those things are very important for certain types of industry sectors. But as we think about more professional job opportunities, as we think about corporate headquarters, as we think about software development, as we think about some of the higher end professional job things that I think all of us aspire to have more of in Louisiana, for the most part, those things aren't really that attracted to those sort of geographic strengths or those natural resources strengths of our state. And that's why we need kind of a balanced attack. We need to focus on both how do we leverage the geography and the natural resources, but increasingly, and even in fact in those areas, we need to be focused on workforce development and how do we sell the talent of Louisiana. Because increasingly in the future, more and more of the wealth, even in manufacturing, even in oil and gas, is going to be going to places that have the talent to deliver what those companies are looking for. And that's a big part of what we focused on at LED.
You talk about that balance, and one of the things that you guys, I think, have done very, very well is staying balanced in terms of the amount of effort and resources you apply toward recruiting new investment and new jobs, and the amount of time you spend focus on the existing businesses in Louisiana that for too long may have been overlooked by our State Department of Economic Development. You created a business expansion and retention group to specifically focus on those existing businesses, helping them grow and create new jobs and bring in new investment for those companies as well. Talk a little bit about that part of the organization.
Well, Tim, you know, I think any prudent, successful economic development effort is going to focus first and foremost on business retention and expansion. Let me put that in kind of quantitative terms. I mentioned to you earlier, my aspiration is for us to add about 40,000 net new jobs a year in the course of a healthy national economy. In my dreams, we would hit 50,000 jobs a year occasionally. If you look at our existing employers, we have about 120,000 employers in Louisiana that collectively employ right at about 2 million people, 2 million existing jobs. So in a great year, we might attract 40,000, but we got 2 million. The health and success of that existing base of about 2 million jobs worth of companies dwarfs anything in any particular year that we could add. And so what we did, we created a team of professionals that we actually go out and meet proactively with hundreds of Louisiana companies every year. We obviously focus on some of the biggest economic drivers like the Exxons and the Dows and the Georgia Pacifics of the world, but we also have focused on some of the high growth younger companies that have real growth potential as well, like a Marucci Bats or someone like that, a Trace Security, to have sort of a balanced attack. And we found that that's been very useful to make sure those companies know that the state values their presence here, that we want to help them address any obstacles that they may face, and particularly when they have any growth opportunities, that we can cultivate those. It's been a very successful effort. In fact, I would tell you most of the job wins that we've had have been expansions of existing Louisiana companies where they could have expanded in Texas or Mississippi or somewhere else. They decided instead to expand in Louisiana. One of the best outcomes of that I did not anticipate is when we take care of our existing businesses and they know that we're responsive to them, that we care about them, we're in good communication with them. When we try to recruit in a new company, a major new company, what's one of the first things they're going to do before they make their decision? They're going to talk to some of the existing companies and say, what is it like to do business here? So it's really a very important part of what we do, and it's actually, although it wasn't intended, it's actually really helped us be more successful in our business recruitment efforts as well.
Speaking of that success, we've had great success in Louisiana. We come back from the break. I want to talk specifically with Stephen about some of the great success we've seen and what might be on the horizon. We're visiting with Secretary Stephen Morey of the Department of Economic Development, and you're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.
The Louisiana Business and Industry Show will be back right after this. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show with Tim Johnson.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Thanks for giving us part of your day. We're visiting with Secretary Stephen Morey of the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. And Stephen, we've talked about a lot of things. We've talked about the improvement in our business climate. We've talked about the great success. We've talked about what you guys are doing to focus on existing businesses in Louisiana. But if you take that combination of the improvement in our business climate and you couple it with these low natural gas prices we've seen, our state is just experiencing an unprecedented number of announcements about investment and jobs coming to our state. Big projects like Sasol and Shell and Nucor and Methanex down in Ascension Parish. Talk about these announcements. Talk about the process of bringing some of those companies here and how exciting it must be for you and your team to be involved in this.
Well, it is profoundly exciting. I would tell you, 5 years ago, natural gas prices popped over $10. And that was not a good time for our state because we have so much of our chemical industry is very dependent upon natural gas as a feedstock. And really all of our companies that are very energy intensive are dependent upon natural gas prices because they impact their electricity rates. Well, lo and behold, all these shale plays happen. And the McKinsey Global Institute actually did an analysis recently in the national economy looking at what are the biggest catalysts to drive the economy forward. The number one biggest one was shale gas and the downstream impacts of shale gas nationally. Now, so it's created a massive amount of reinvestment in the manufacturing sector in the United States and given us the ability to compete for some of the biggest projects in Louisiana history. Now, most of those projects consider a lot of states around the country, but I would tell you most of the time, the really big projects that are natural gas related tend to focus on the Gulf Coast area. Most of the time, we're going to get in the finals between Texas and Louisiana. And I'm really proud to share, with the changes that we made and really putting Louisiana in a much more competitive position, most of the biggest projects we've won over Texas. In fact, the two biggest foreign direct investment projects in the history of the United States and the two biggest, obviously, manufacturing projects in the history of Louisiana were both projects that we won over the state of Texas. One of them was the Sasol project, which they estimate will be about $21 billion, a gas to liquids complex and an ethane cracker facility integrated. And then, of course, the second biggest was the Shell project, which will be well over $12.5 billion for another gas to liquids facility. Thanks to those wins and others, we actually looked at the national data. I had my team look at this last week. If you look at Texas and Louisiana, the last 4 years, capital investment for private sector economic development announcements, we've had 20% more capital investment than the entire state of Texas in Louisiana over the last 4 years. And I don't think anybody would have predicted that 5 years ago. So we're seeing big projects all over the state. You've got, of course, the Benchler Steel Tube project, big German steel company, Northwest Louisiana, $1 billion investment, 675 jobs. Of course, most of these projects have salaries in the range of $50,000 to $100,000 a year, plus benefits, and there's dozens of them all over the state. It's a very exciting time.
Well, it really is, and given all the great success and all the announcements that we've already had, I know through my conversations with you that there's even more on the horizon. Talk about what's coming.
There is
and what
more
we
on the
might
horizon.
See coming up over the next 18 months or so.
Absolutely. Well, I would tell you, I'm more excited about the next year than I think I was about the last 5.5. I mean,
and that's a huge statement given what's happened here, right?
Yeah, it is. The outlook today, it's stunning. It is stunning, Tim. We are in the finals today for, we had the big IBM announcement, 800 jobs.
A game changer, right?
Game changer. We're in the finals for several software development centers ranging from 300 to 800 jobs each.
Wow.
We're in the finals for corporate headquarters relocations. In some cases, companies moving back to Louisiana that left after Katrina. In other cases, companies can think about moving here for the first time. We're seeing significant interest in the aerospace industry. We had the big AAR announcement, 500 new jobs, aircraft MRO facility in Chenault. But we're seeing several more in aerospace assembly and other aerospace projects. The automotive sector is interested in Louisiana. We're seeing pharmaceutical projects, distribution projects. We're going to see a very diverse range of projects announced in Louisiana over the next 12 to 18 months. And that's on top of $70 billion or so, 83,000 new jobs on the way from the things we've already announced. We are going to be experiencing the most exciting period economically, I think, in Louisiana's history over the next 3 to 5 years.
We're excited to watch for it. Thanks for the great work that you've done. That's a wrap, guys. I want to say a special thank you to Stephen for joining us today. And be sure to tune in next week at this same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show on Cox 4.